Alright, so A said 6 minus negative 10. When I see that minus a negative, I immediately think of the house model, and I think, oh, we're getting rid of weights, and getting rid of weights means that this is going up. So for this one, you should have started at positive 6 and just gone up 10, which will give you to 16. And that's the same as saying we started at 6 and went up 10, or 6 plus 10. For D, it says negative 7 plus 6. I remember that the first number is just like the starting point, so it's sort of like this is an elevator starting 7 floors in the basement and going up 6. So if I try to model that on an open number line, I can put 0 here, starting at negative 7. And since we're going up 6, and 6 has a smaller value than 7, I know we're not actually going to make it to 0, but we're going to get really close. So if we were 7 away from 0, and then we went up closer to the lobby, we would end up still underneath, like 1 floor in the basement, and so the answer would be negative 1. Alright, for B, we have 2 negatives, and that can look a little confusing, but I remember that this first number is our starting point, so we're going to start at negative 8, and then we're adding a negative, so I think of Carl's house, and we're adding weights to the house, which is going to pull it down. So this one is really going down. So from negative 8, if I were to go down 3, it helps for me to just remember that 0 is up over here, so when we go down, it's like we're going deeper below 0, so the answer should be negative 11, and if you want to get fancy, we could have rewritten this as negative 8 minus 3 is equal to negative 11. Alright, and then for E, it says negative 9 minus 10. Again, I remember that that starting number is the starting point. So it's like we're starting 9 floors in the basement. And then, since we're subtracting, we're going to go down. So we're actually just going to go, it's like we're going 10 floors deeper. And if we do that, you should end up at negative 19 because you got farther away from 0. Alright, and the state test level rational number problems, we have negative 55 hundredths plus 7 tenths. I'm going to rewrite both of these as decimals. So negative 55 hundredths stays the same, and I know that 7 tenths means that all I have to do is put a 7 in the tenths place, because those are equivalent. But then 7 tenths would be equivalent to 70 hundredths. There are a lot of reasons why that's true. One of the easiest ways to picture it is just by realizing that you can multiply by 10 over 10 to get 70 hundredths. But okay, now I have an easier problem to solve. I'm going to start below 0 at negative 55 hundredths. And then we're adding, so we're going to go up. We're definitely going to go past 0 because 70 hundredths is bigger than 55 hundredths. And we'd only have 15 hundredths left over. So that's why the answer is 15 hundredths. Alright, and then for F we have negative 5 and 4 tenths plus 10 and 6 tenths. That negative starting number means we're starting below 0 at negative 5 and 4 tenths. And we're adding 10 and 6 tenths. So if we were to do that in one jump to start, we're going to make it to 0. And then to figure out how much left we have of that 10 and 6 tenths, you could do 10 6 tenths minus 5 and 4 tenths, which equals 5 and 2 tenths. So that's what's left over. And that's why the answer is 5 and 2 tenths. Alright, for G, I have negative 30 divided by negative 5. Well, I know that 5 goes into 30 6 times, so I know that it's going to be 6. And then, when I ask myself, is it positive or negative? Same signs, they multiply to positive, but they also divide to a positive, because those are inverse operations. So this is correct, positive 6. Then when I get to h, it says 4 times negative 11. And I know that 4 groups of 11 is 44. But then when I want to figure out is it positive or negative, you could think of the patterns you discovered, which tell us that when we're multiplying with one negative, the answer is negative. Or, so different signs multiply to a negative. Next, we have negative 4 times 0. For this one, it helps just to think, I'm going to use the commutative property and just switch them. And 0 times anything is 0, and the reason is it's like you want 0 groups of something, and 0 groups of anything is just the same as 0. And it looks like they're different signs, but you don't put negative 0 because on a number line you have 0. The numbers on the right of 0 are positive, the numbers on the left of 0 are negative, but 0 is not to the right of itself, and it's not to the left of itself. It's just the center. So there's no such thing as positive 0 or negative 0. It literally marks the center of the universe. All right, and last one, I know that 100 times 1 has to be 100. Sort of the same thing as I, but instead we have one group of 100 is 100. And then, since the signs are the same, it's going to stay as a positive. Test level challenge. This one is identical to a problem that was on the test last year, and it really tests your integer adding and subtracting knowledge. So it's a long line of math, which means that it's an expression. In any expression, you have to follow the order of operations to evaluate it or to figure out what it equals. Remember that inside the parentheses, there's just negative numbers, so we don't need to start there unless there's something inside the parentheses to do, like 4 plus 5 or something. So addition and subtraction are the only operations I see here. We have subtraction, addition, and addition. But we actually don't start with addition here because we're going to go from left to right. So the first thing we're going to do is that. We're going to forget about this stuff for a minute. So negative 65 hundredths minus negative 2/5. That's like a tricky problem just by itself. But right now I'm all about the decimals, so I'm going to turn this into a decimal. 2/5. To find a decimal version, first I want to make an equivalent fraction that's out of 10 or 100. And since 5 goes into 10, let's just kind of keep this simple. That would be the same as 4/10. And then since the 65 up here is in hundredths, I could also multiply by 10 over 10 to get another equivalent fraction, which is 40 hundredths, and that's the same as this. So I'm going to rewrite this problem as negative 65 hundredths minus negative 40 hundredths. All right. Now that I have that, I'm going to solve this first problem on the number line. We have negative 65 hundredths minus negative 40 hundredths is like subtracting weights, so this needs to go up. So I'm going to go up 40 hundredths. And when I do that, I'm getting closer to 0, and you should end up with negative 25 hundredths. So this first part becomes negative 25 hundredths. Now, the problem's not done because I still got to bring these things down. So I'm going to bring down the plus 6/10 and the plus negative 3/4. I hope you're following so far and pushing yourself to solve it because this is definitely doable. It's just a bunch of problems in one. So next, going from left to right, we're going to add those two things together. I'm actually going to continue this number line over here because we're going to continue going up. We're at negative 25 hundredths. We're adding 6/10. Remember that 6/10 is the same as 60 hundredths. So if I go up another 25 hundredths, that would get me to 0. And of the original 60, I should have 35 hundredths left over. So this is going to add to 35 hundredths. And now I'm going to bring down plus negative 3/4. Make a little bit more room. and I see that 3/4, and so I'm like, all right, I need to turn u into a decimal. I know that 3/4 is equivalent to 75 hundredths, so I'm just going to rewrite negative 3/4 as negative 0.75, or negative 75 hundredths. Since we're adding a negative, I know that this is going down because we're adding weight. So on my last open number line, I start at 35 hundredths. I know we're going down, so we're going to make it to 0. And then of the 75, I should have 40 left over. And that's how you would get the answer of negative 40 hundredths, or negative 4 tenths. Nice job if you figure that out on your own. Also good job if you watched that last part because you had it wrong and you wanted to understand how to do it. I know it's tricky, but you guys are capable of this and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow.